Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. But early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Political stakes of first century Palestine give a certain sharpness to the drama that is unfolding in this scene presented to us today by St. John. The Pharisees and the scribes imagine that they have something to finally be able to hang Jesus on. They feel that they have cornered him. Not only because, as they do on so many other occasions, they feel that they can finally discredit him, or that they can find some way to undermine his claim that he is the one who has come not to abolish the law or its tenets, but in fact to fulfill the law. But here as well there is an added drama to this, since the question of the law that is brought before Jesus involves something that the Pharisees themselves are unable to keep. The question of the law concerning capital punishment, something that their occupation by the Romans has prevented them from being able to carry out, even if they had ever been so inclined. It is upon this tightrope that Jesus himself now walks. On the one hand, having to say something like this law of Moses no longer applies, or that it is that he has found some other way to fulfill the particular prescript of this Mosaic law, or on the other hand, to in fact enable exactly what it is that they seem to be demanding of him. The execution of this woman for not simply a private sin, something that first century Palestinian Jews, including Jesus, would never have imagined this act to be, but in fact a crime, one might even say, a high kind of crime, the sort of crime that undermines the very foundations of family life. It is this dilemma that Jesus escapes, as he does on so many other occasions, by making of this moment a teaching moment, and in fact a moment of fulfillment, a moment in which he shows that the cross that he himself will carry and will suffer upon is itself truly the fulfillment of all the Mosaic law, is the fulfillment of all of the prophecies that have been that he has come to bring about in his own flesh. He begins to bend down and write on the ground with his finger. Hardly a more cryptic verse in the Gospels. And yet it is exactly the fulfillment of a prophecy that seems to be going on here. As St. Augustine points out, Jesus himself is simply bringing to fulfillment what God is said to do by the prophet Jeremiah, to write in the ground, to write in the earth the names of all of those who forsake the Lord. And perhaps it is exactly this that Jesus is writing in the ground, the names of those present who are forsaking the Lord, who are forsaking the Lord not simply by their seeming demand for vengeance and their carelessness with the life of this woman, but also and especially by seeking, in a real sense, to put the Lord himself upon trial. This woman herself is simply a pawn in their game, as is the Lord Jesus as well, even if he is a sort of bigger fish that they wish to catch. It is Jesus himself who is the one who is on trial, and it is Jesus himself, in a certain sense, who is being condemned, even if his execution does not take place right at this time. It is in this way, brothers and sisters, that we find, in fact, the condemnation, the judgment of God by man to take place throughout history and in so many places in the world. That is through the carrying out of some kind of scapegoating of one person who, although not guilty, is not guilty as charged, is not fully guilty of the crime that they are being accused of. But it is God himself who is considered, in fact, to be the one who is truly guilty, the one who is truly behind this problem. And here, as in all of these other cases, no less, since Jesus himself, claiming to be the Messiah, claiming to be the one to bring fulfillment to the law of Moses and the prophets, claiming to be the one to, in fact, bring about the deliverance of Israel, is nonetheless the one who is not able to carry out the Mosaic law. Why? Because of Roman occupation. How has God, in fact, delivered his people in this scenario? How is it that Christ can claim that any Messiah worthy of the name is capable of leading his people into righteousness if he cannot even carry out the law of Moses? How is it that Jesus, in fact, can be who he says he is without blasphemy? How is it, in fact, that the Pharisees and the scribes are not justified entirely in the condemnation that they make of him here and now, and that will be effected in blood later on in the end of the gospel? Jesus himself answers this question, and he answers it in a cryptic way, in a way that in fact will only come to light with his resurrection, since it is in his resurrection that Jesus is vindicated by God himself, who is faithful to the one who is faithful to him to the end. Jesus is faithful, and he is the innocent one, the one who is capable of, who is the only one present capable of this sort of judgment that they themselves demand to be able to give. He is the one who is, in fact, without sin, who is perfectly capable of casting the first stone as well as the last, and yet he does not. He brings to fulfillment this law of Moses by proclaiming the mercy of God, by making the fountain of living water flow up from the sands in their midst, and to flow especially through the channel of his most merciful heart, which in fact will flow with blood and water when it is pierced while he stands upon the cross. Brothers and sisters, it is this living water of mercy, which is not simple indulgence of sin. It is not simply an exposure of the structures of sin or the structures of inequity in the world. Jesus himself is not to be thought of here as simply one pawn in our own political games, in our own attempts to garner his support for our ideology, whether it's Jesus the feminist, or Jesus the vindicator of rights and privacy, or Jesus the one who is against capital punishment. All of these agendas, brothers and sisters, and our attempts to put Jesus in that box is to do no less and no other than what the Pharisees themselves do today, to make him a part of our earthly attempts at justice and building this kingdom here on earth, so that we do not have to follow him to where he leads in heaven. Brothers and sisters, the Lord is calling us today as well to see the way that he not only does not condemn us, but he calls us to give up our condemnation of others, and especially to give up our condemnation of God, our judgment of God, our presumption to be able to say about God that His way is not right, His way is not just, His way is not enough. In fact, this is what we do when we choose sin. It is exactly what we do when we choose, especially the sort of sin that we feel is justified in putting others down, in casting them down, in condemning them to whatever fate we feel is just, whether it is by our words or by our actions. Today we ask, brothers and sisters, that the Lord will give us this grace, this confidence, even if imperfectly, as the scribes and the Pharisees do so today. We cannot imagine that they simply, through these words of Jesus, have all of a sudden come to a perfect contrition for their own sins, or a perfect shame about their own sins and their own forsaking of the Lord. No. They themselves see that they have missed their chance. They have overplayed their hand, and they will take the next chance that they have. But it is some of them. We have the reasonable confidence to say that in fact we'll see what the Lord has been doing with His servant and with His people, His plan of salvation, in the cross and in the resurrection, just as He does so with us today. We ask that these mysteries, in fact, brothers and sisters, will cause us to give up all of our pretensions to be able to know as well or better than God how it is that He should bring about salvation, how it is especially that He should show mercy, and instead be the recipients of that mercy and the channels of that mercy, the channels of that living water of mercy flowing from His sacred heart into our own lives, our own families, and our own communities.